If sometimes you feel you are being manipulated and you want more control of your life, you want nobody to be able to manipulate you, I'm going to give you 3 things you can implement in your life so that you can deal with manipulation. I asked on my social media, what question would you like me to answer on my live video? I do a live video now every Sunday at 3 p.m. So stay tuned every Sunday, 3 p.m. I do a live video answering your questions. So how do you deal with manipulation? If you want more control of your life, if you want to be able to deal with manipulation, pay attention, pay very, very close attention to this video. What's the definition of manipulation, by the way? There are 2 definitions if you look up manipulation. Number 1 is to handle something and to control something skillfully. That's definition number 1. It's a good definition, isn't it? Number 2 definition is to control and influence something cleverly and often unfairly and unscrupulously. So that's a bad definition of manipulation. So when you look at manipulation, I want you to take on this perspective before you learn how to deal with manipulation. Manipulation is something you're doing already. To manipulate something is to handle something and control something with skill. Now, you're already doing it. You're already manipulating. You're already telling people what to do and how to do things. And you're already hoping and wishing they do something. You just don't know how to skillfully convey it. You just don't know how to skillfully influence that person. To influence something is to manipulate something. So it's only a matter of whether you're manipulating something haphazardly or you're manipulating something with skill. And so I encourage you to take on the skill of manipulation, but manipulation is not necessarily the proper word to use. I would use influence or persuasion. But persuasion and influence in and of itself is a form of manipulation. So I'm going to give you 3 things you have to implement so that you can deal with manipulation and deal with it really, really well. As you know, I'm a trained hypnotist, and so I'm going to show you why that's important at the end of this video. And I'm also, if you stick towards the end of this video and this live, either podcast or wherever you're watching this live broadcast, wherever you're watching this, if you stick to the end of the video, I'll give you a resource for you to move further and develop more of your influence and persuasion and manipulation skills. You're having more control of your life. And I'm also going to share with you a rule that I have in my relationships so that it can prevent from or minimize unscrupulous, bad manipulation. So as you know, I'm a trained hypnotist, and I asked my teacher, my mentor, I asked him, I recognized that hypnosis is everywhere around us. And so how do you protect yourself from being manipulated? How do you protect yourself from hypnosis? How do you protect yourself from people that are implementing those things in hypnosis that most people don't really know that's going on in their life, in their communication? And he said, want to know what he said? He said, there's no way to protect yourself from hypnosis. The best way to protect yourself from hypnosis is to know hypnosis. The only way you can protect yourself from hypnosis is to know hypnosis. And I want you to put this into perspective. The only way to protect yourself from manipulation is to know manipulation. The only way to protect yourself from skilled persuasion, skilled manipulators, is to yourself have knowledge how manipulation and persuasion and influence works. That is the only way, because the only way you can protect yourself is to recognize it's going on. It's to recognize it's going on. And when you recognize it's going on, then you can say, okay, so this is something that I have to watch out for. Let me now engage my conscious mind, because the goal of the conscious mind is to delineate between information. So, if you don't know my story already, I am the founder of Great Relationships University. I'm the author of Relationships 101. And I came into the US barely able to speak any English at all. And when I got to the US, this English they were speaking was completely different from what I've learned, from what I've studied, the very little of it. And so I didn't know much about communication, and I grew up not being able to communicate very well. And as a result, I didn't have great relationships, because, mark my words, without your skill to communicate, without great communication, you can't have great relationships. And this is essentially why I love this topic, because the topic of communication. And I'll tell you why. It's because I had after a couple of terrible relationships that I've had, I mean, I love the people that I were with, and I loved my girlfriends, but I wasn't very much of a developed person. I was very young. And so I drew a line in the sand, and I said, enough is enough. I'm going to get better with my communication. I'm going to get better with my relationships. Just so happens I found a way and an opportunity to do it. And over the next 10 years, the only thing I did was study communication and relationships. It's not the only thing, but I spent most of my time studying for 10 plus years communication and relationships. You know how they say that Einstein is an absolute genius? Well, Einstein wasn't even a scientist. But the thing that Einstein did was he studied light for 10 years. For 10 years, all he studied was the science of light. And so, if you study anything for any long period of time, there's somebody that said, I think it was from the book Outliers. He said that if you do something 10,000 times, you'll be good enough to be world class. And so, if you study anything for 10 years, only that one thing, you're going to become quote unquote a genius. And so, it's no secret that I know a lot about relationships and communication, but it's only because I spent so much time doing it for 12 plus years. Anyway, so what are the 3 things that you have to implement in order for you to be able to protect yourself or deal with manipulation? Because remember, you can't protect yourself. You can only know more about it, so that you know what's going on, and so you know how to distinguish between good manipulation and bad manipulation, because it's always going on. Persuasion is always going on. What's the number one thing? Number one is these are something that I go really, really deep dive into in the Great Relationships University. It's an online course, greatrelationshipsu.com. And one of the things that I dive into is the 3 archetypes of people, the 3 classes of people in the world. There are 3 archetypes of people when it comes to personal independence. And then there's one super archetype. If you are a student in the course, you will remember this. And I want you to pay attention to this, because you're either one of these people, and I want you to strive to become one very particular one. Number 1 is the kind of person who is the follower archetype. The follower archetype is validated when they do the thing they're supposed to do by people that tell them they're supposed to do that thing. They're validated by doing the right thing based on what they're told to do. The second archetype are the leader archetype, but really they're not actual leaders, they're more like managers. And managers, or the manager archetype, their validation comes from when people follow them. When people are doing the thing that they tell them to do, then they feel validated. When people are doing what they said they tell them to do. And then there's a third archetype. Third archetype is neither validated by people following them or other people following them. They're not validated by this. Actually, let me correct that. They're not validated by doing what they're supposed to do, by what other people say they're supposed to do. And they're also not validated by people that follow them. So they're not validated at all. And I'll tell you why that's important when it comes to dealing with manipulation. Because you can be manipulated. If you're a follower, you can easily be manipulated by someone who's a skillful manipulator because you're validated by what other people tell you you're supposed to do things. And when they say, good girl, good boy, you did the right thing, then you are essentially easily manipulated. The second archetype is when it comes to manipulation, they're manipulated easily because they get the validation of people when people follow them. And when they're no longer being followed, when they're no longer being followed by other people, they don't get that validation. They don't feel that rush, that power. And so you could easily manipulate someone that way. Now, how do you manipulate someone who is neither validated by people that follow them or they are following what they're supposed to do? Well, they get validated by other people's misery. When other people share in their misery, they're validated by that. And so you can get manipulated in that way. So how do you protect yourself from manipulation? There's one super archetype. It's called a super archetype because it's someone most people is not. And it's a worthwhile endeavor for you to pursue this archetype, this class of person. It's a very, very rare archetype, and this archetype is called the Independent. The Independent, I want you to pay attention to this because it's a worthwhile endeavor for you to acquire in your life, and it's something on the way to your enlightenment. The Independent is validated solely by the results of their decisions. The Independent is validated solely by the results of their decisions. They go and do things requiring only the validation of their own, and they say, well, that worked, or that didn't work, or this makes sense, or that doesn't make sense, and so I'm going to go with that, or I'm going to go with this, based on the results of your decisions, neither requiring the validation of other people and only requiring the validation of yourself. When you get your validation from yourself, what does this have to do with manipulation? Most people's manipulation comes from, and the very, very subtle and the very, very powerful types of manipulation comes from, they're getting rid of your critical thinking, number one. They're making the critical thinking for you. They say, this is the way you should do this. This is not the way you should do this. I want you to only look at it in one way, our way. They get rid of your skill to critically think, to critically reason. But when your soul validation is from the results of your own decisions, because you find out things that don't work, find out things that work, and you do the things that work, you don't do the things that work, and you're not manipulated by other people guilting you or shaming you from doing things that you'd like. How do you manipulate that person? It's very, very difficult because they're looking at the knowledge, they're recognizing, hey, there are things that I know in my life which I don't know why I know them. And so what I'm going to do is, rather than believe that they're true, I'm going to see whether or not they're true for myself. And so you test it out. And some people will say, what are you doing? You're going to look stupid. I did this mental exercise. You really should check it out. It's kind of a long exercise, but it's on Great Relationships University. It's on Module 1 on the Mindset Mastery. I do this long thought experiment where how you can control your ego and make your ego your cheerleader and your bitch. Really check that out. It's really good. So it's very hard to manipulate someone who is only validated by the results of their decisions because they base things critically based on reason, evidence, and logic. Number 2, you must get self-security you must acquire security from your personal development. You must become self-secure in your personal development. There's a idea called security. Do you imagine you're secure anywhere you are in the world? Security is just a sensation. It's a feeling. There is no actual security other than your ability to survive and your ability. This is how we define it in the Great Relationships University. Security is your ability to survive and your ability and skill to influence others to help you if you need it. Security is your ability to survive, to provide for yourself, your own survival, and your ability to influence others. That is your ability to security. So you're saying, what do you mean there's no sense of security? I have a lot of security. I have a lot of money. Well, you could have more money in the bank than the government. That's like Steve Jobs did, and have no security when you have pancreatic cancer at 54 years old. How much billions of cash, liquid cash, money in the bank do you need if you are on a plane crashing into the earth at 800 miles per hour? No amount of security, no amount of money will provide you security. How much energy and effort do you imagine it would take to break down the doors in your house? How many people do you imagine walks through by your house, by your door? It would be very easy for somebody to break into your house. There is no security. It's just a sensation. The only security you have is your ability to survive and influence others, which is why I love Great Relationships University, because that's what we teach. How social dynamics works and how you influence other people. What does that have to do with manipulation? When you are self-secure, it's hard to manipulate someone who is self-secure, who is independent and self-secure, and secure in their own personal development. What does that mean? It means that you rely on yourself. You rely on your personal development, and you are self-secure and you're self-happy. And the personal development you have, you rely on those skills. And your personal development includes your professional development. What is your ability to provide enough value to a market of people that would like to pay for your skills? That is your professional development. Your personal development is what is your enlightenment? What is your moral code and ethical code? What is your ability to speak? What is your ability to communicate? What is your ability to build relationships with people? What is your ability to communicate well and persuade people well? When you have security in your personal development by personally developing yourself, you're protecting yourself from manipulation, the bad kind. Number 3, the last thing, and then I'll give you the bonus thing that I do with my relationship so that to prevent from manipulation. Number 3 is have clear boundaries and moral codes. Clear boundaries and moral codes. Moral codes are essentially boundaries. A moral code is what you won't do and what you will do. What you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. And you want to live by the mantra, I will never do anything I wouldn't do. Anything that you would normally not do, and you do those things, you're going to regret it. Anything that you wouldn't do, and you do that, you're going to regret it. Now, everybody, the reason why it's said like that is because everybody has different moral codes. Everybody has different ethical codes. Everybody has different things that they wouldn't do and would not do. And that's fine. But you have to be very clear about what you would and would not do. And that takes a little bit of experience. And it doesn't mean you have to experience a whole lifetime so that you can find out what your boundaries and moral codes are. You can gain something called perspective. Not only your perspective, but the perspective of other people. Find mentors who have great moral codes and ethical codes. With technology, there's no excuse. What we provide here is a full in the Great Relationships University. I don't mean to keep promoting my course, but you really have to go in there because it's 12 plus hours of learning what you should and what you can and cannot do, some perspective when it comes to moral codes and ethical codes, and a bunch of other stuff. And so you want to get a complete set of moral codes that are really effective and really make you a happy person and fulfilled in life and satisfied and successful. We provide that there. So you get perspective from reading books from people, from authors. You get perspective from having mentors. You get perspective from people who you admire. These are important perspectives you can incorporate in your life, and you find out more and more, you refine more and more as you gain perspective through experience or other people's experience. You refine your moral codes and you find out more and more what you would and would not do. Okay, so what's the bonus? Here's the bonus. Since I am a trained hypnotist, I have a lot of power. They say that an average person's fists, they're not very dangerous. They're not considered lethal weapons. But when you have the fist of a double black belt or whatever the belts are, a red belt, a black belt in martial arts, those fists are no longer non-lethal. They become lethal. And so, because I'm a trained hypnotist, I'm a trained persuader not in a bad sense. Because I'm a trained hypnotist, I know how manipulation works, and I know how persuasion works, and I know how communication works. That makes me incredibly skillful. And it could be dangerous if I use it in a bad way. If I use it in a bad way, that's not a good thing. It's like having lethal weapons as fists. My fists, I don't think, are lethal weapons. I'm not that skilled in martial arts. But I do know hypnosis. I do know how the mind works. So, can I manipulate someone if I wanted to in a bad way? Yes, I can. Do I choose to? Of course not. That's not a very good way to live. And I despise people that manipulate others for their own selfish gain, selfish in a way that they don't consider the person whom they're communicating with. And so I put things in place in my relationships, and I put this rule in my relationships to protect myself and herself and my girlfriend from any kind of manipulation. Here's the rule that I put. It's a fantastic rule, and it's a rule that you should have in your relationship because it's fundamentally sound, it's reasonable, and it works out so that you have love in your relationship, a relationship fundamentally based on love. And here's what it is. You must be loyal to yourself foremost. Each individual, each party in the relationship must be loyal to themselves foremost. Be with me for you, and I will be with you for me. Do things for me for you, and I will do things for you for me. Each individual must become self-interested and must look out for their self-interest first and foremost. Because the only gratification the most gratifying feeling that you'll ever get in your relationship, are you ready for this? The most gratifying feeling that you'll ever get in your relationships is when you recognize that your partner is with you by choice. Every single time, by choice. They don't sleep with you because it's the only bed. They sleep with you because out of all the beds that they could be sleeping in, they're in bed with you. And this choice has to be ongoing. You say, well, they chose me. But sure, they could have been in bed in many different beds, sleeping in many different beds in the beginning of the relationship. But once they're settled in with you, then it's the only bed, then how do you know whether or not they're in bed with you because they want to, or they're in bed with you because it's the only bed? Now I go, I don't know, I think 5 hours. I do a 5-hour training on relationships mastery in the Great Relationships University online course. But that's a thing that I do. And I have contracts, and I talk about contracts in relationships. But I have contracts that really make this very, very, very clear. And it's very important for me that they recognize that, hey, I'm a trained hypnotist. I know a lot about manipulation. I'm not going to manipulate you in a bad way that's not to your well-being, but just in case, and just so to protect yourself and to protect myself. Because my brain is considered a lethal weapon if it were ever to be considered that way in court of law. I want you to recognize that. I want you to know. And this is also the reason why I don't sleep with anybody after if they've had more than 2 glasses to drink. And I don't sleep with anybody who's drunk at all, who's had a lot to drink. It's because I could be considered, my mind, my persuasion could be considered as something that's lethal, but that's besides the point. So I ensure this in relationships. I ensure this, that they must become loyal to themselves, because that's the only way that I'll know that they're with me. And if they're with me, it's because out of all of their options, they're with me. And they do things, you do anything for me because you want to do it for me, not because you're doing it for me. You're doing it for you, for your happiness. Because remember, I didn't do a live video about it, but I think I did a post. I did a post on it. And regardless, everything we do it self-interestedly. And it's called enlightened self-interest, to recognize the distinction between doing everything you do as self-interested, doing things for you. Even the good things that you do it self-interestedly. And enlightened self-interest is you're recognizing this distinction. And because I recognize that you do everything we do it for ourselves, at the very least, because it makes us feel good and happy to do it. And I want that in the relationship. I want the recognition of that. I want that enlightenment of that. So let me recap what I talked about before I give you the resource for you to delve in deeper. Remember, 3 things to put into place to protect yourself from manipulation. Number 1 is you must become an independent. Out of the 3 class, you must become the super class, and you must work towards that. Work towards getting the validation solely from the results of your decisions. Only seek the validation of your own self. The only validation you need is your own validation of yourself. And you never require the validation of other people. And in fact, seeking the validation of other people who you don't even know nor admire is insane. Number 2, find security in your personal development. The only security that there is your ability to survive and to influence other people. Your ability to influence other people is your personal development and your professional development when you have enough skill so that other people will pay for it. Have security in that. Don't find security from anywhere else. Have security in your abilities and your skills. Don't find security. Offload your security to another person, because when the other person goes away, where's your security? There it goes. Number 3, have clear boundaries and moral codes. Never do anything you would never do. You will regret it. Hope you got some value out of that. Now, to go further and deeper into this resource for you to have better skills when it comes to persuasion and communication and relationships, head to greatrelationshipsu.com or see a Great Relationships University ambassador. Now, what it is it's 6 courses of 12 plus hours of training on personal development, enlightenment, communication, social dynamics, and relationships mastery. On relationships alone, we talk 5 plus hours training. So why would you, Rowan? Why can't I just go to your website, and why can't I just sign up with you? Because you're way better off when you enroll with a Great Relationships University ambassador. Why? It's because you have their support, you have their sponsorship, and I'm the founder, so I'm really busy with the company. So if you sign up with them, then you'll have a lot of support when enrolling into the Great Relationships University. And they can answer all of your questions. All right, so I appreciate you paying attention. If you have any questions, it is a conversation. If you have any questions, please let me know. Comment in the comment box below this video or blog post or podcast. I'll talk to you on the next live. Bye-bye. Next Sunday. Bye-bye.